a very overdue response. And I think the day was spent crunching down to find out who was going to be able to get through and who wasn't. And of course, naturally, there are a whole lot of people who won't be able to get through. So whilst we're celebrating for those that can, it's also very sad for an awful lot of people that can't.
And Cameron and Tanya, what do you think? Sorry, Katie. Sorry, Cameron and Tanya, I'm speaking about you to Katie, which is very rude. But Katie, in terms of your assessment of who can get in, will Tanya be able to join Cameron?
No, because the way, this is one of those kind of announcements where once you start to actually analyse it, you realise just how few will get through comparatively.
Yeah, OK. Cameron and Tanya, I want to bring you in. Cameron, you are teaching maths at Hutt Valley High School, a fantastic school. You came here in October 2019, encouraged to come, right, as part of the Work to Residence scheme because New Zealand was after teachers. That's the case, isn't it?
Well, just to correct you, I arrived actually in January 2020.
Right.
Received a job offer in October 2019.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. My mistake. And it was always the intention that Tanya and your son Aidan would follow you, right?
Absolutely. So we responded to active marketing internationally by New Zealand for teachers. And acting in good faith, I resigned from my job, put everything in place for me to arrive first, and then for Tanya and Aidan to follow me a few months later.
And when you say you resigned from your job and you put everything in place, tell me what putting everything in place consisted of. So what did you do, Cameron?
So first of all, you have to have a lot of documentation in place, and especially being professionals, you have to, in the case of teachers, you have to obtain teacher registration. And that is a significant exercise in itself. You also have to have your qualifications assessed. And then, obviously, the preparation for our own personal move across the world. That is almost a military operation. So, before I left, I had to prepare everything in terms of even giving my wife power of attorney to act on my behalf. And then once I had left, my wife was left with the job of packing up everything, selling the house, rehoming the dogs. And in fact, we even helped her parents to move to a retirement village in preparation of us no longer being there.
Right, so you were absolutely moving from South Africa to New Zealand, and,
yes.
and it was a really permanent move, and it did involve essentially shutting down your South African life. Tanya, you were still there, and so you are left with no Cameron, no house because you've sold it, no dogs because I think you had to rehome them. So how tough has this past year and a bit been?
It's been very difficult because our marriage is very much a partnership, and everything we've done ever since we've been together is we've done everything together, and particularly raising our son. We've always raised him very much together, and Cameron has always been and always will be a very, very hands-on dad. So Aidan and I have really missed that very, very much.
It was your understanding in absolutely good faith, right, that you would be able to follow Cameron, Tanya. There was never any doubt whatsoever about that.
No, so much so that we actually went to see my boss together, and we spoke to him about our reasons for deciding to leave the country and our reasons for resigning. And we're the kind of people who the family unit means very much, not only to me and Cameron, but to our respective families. So it really was a significant and highly traumatic decision, actually.
Yeah, it's a big decision.
that we did.
And New Zealand is a country of immigrants, and there'll be many people watching who've gone through a version of this decision themselves, right? So packing up to start a new life elsewhere is a big thing. Katie, I want to bring you back in. So let's go now, Katie Armstrong, to what Chris Farfoy announced yesterday. Prima facie, I thought when I saw the headline of the announcement and that actually people like Tanya and Cameron would be catered for it, that their reunification would happen as a result of it. Why isn't it?
Well, because the way they've sliced and diced is that you basically had to have had a visa already granted, and that visa still has to be valid. So the fact is that in the majority of situations, like Cameron and Tanya's, the visas were actually in process and then frozen when COVID hit. So it's a catch-22, in fact. Plus, I've just got to tell you, John, I think one of the really big issues is that when people get their visas, even if they got their visas before COVID, they have something called a first entry date. And by definition, those people couldn't come in and activate those visas. And we are very fearful at the moment that those visas will be treated as null and void.
But because they haven't met the date requirements.
Yeah, so they were given a date to come in. They couldn't come in. Now they're being told you have to have a valid visa, but that visa's not valid. Right, I mean, it's a completely circular argument.
Yeah, it is. It is truly a catch-22. So what needed to happen yesterday that didn't happen? And Chris Farfoy's standing by. So what should he have done more than he did?
Well, what we had asked very clearly, and it took us to go to Parliament to actually ask for this, was for a sequencing of all the families impacted that would include the likes of Cameron and others over a period of time to give certainty to them. So we didn't want them all to necessarily come at once, but of course there are a lot of empty MIQ rooms that could have been used, so that's very disappointing. But what we want is a timeline. We don't want people just left dangling like this, not knowing. You know, Cameron doesn't know. What's going to happen next.
What number are we talking about? It's actually not a very large number, is it? What are we talking about?
Well, I think actually those who have visas in process, suspended, will be probably about, if we had used all the beds by now, we could have got them all back in by now.
Okay.
It probably would take 4 to 6 months, we think, to sequence them in. Okay.
I want to come back to you, Cameron and Tanya. And Cameron, at what stage do you say to yourself, this isn't working, I'm going to head home? And I guess that I apologise for using that term. It's glib of me, because you as a family, the three of you, Tanya and Aidan, decided this would be your home. And you sold your home in South Africa. You packed up and you moved to New Zealand. But at what stage did you just call quits and say, I can't stand the separation from my wife and my son, I'm heading back to South Africa? Is that something you're thinking about?
Absolutely. And it's been something I've been thinking of for many months now. It's a very difficult question to answer because we've committed absolutely everything. We've essentially burnt our bridges. I mean, even if I went back to South Africa and tried to re-establish our lives, we would be sort of tainted with, oh, well, he's going to emigrate somewhere else next. So, you know, we need certainty within the next month. Otherwise, I really am going to have to make plans to leave.
Final question to you, Cameron. Then I'm going to go to Tanya, and then I'm going to end with Katie. But Cameron, how's life at Hutt High? You enjoying it there? Good kids? They're behaving themselves? Is it a good school to work at?
Yes, really enjoying the staff, and kids as a whole are great, yes. We just have a few issues with our classrooms.
Right, OK. Tanya, I want to come to you. I've got teenage kids, and 13 is a precious, special and precarious age. And I suspect you were describing Aidan and Cameron as very close, and Cameron being a beautiful hands-on dad, as dad should be. So how are you going in the absence of your husband and Aidan's dad?
It could be better, of course. Just to give you one, it's a seemingly silly example, but the other day Aidan came home and said, Mom, tomorrow I have to wear a tie to school. And I looked at him and said, well, I don't know how to knot a tie. What are we going to do? And he said, oh, this would be a really good time to have Dad here.
Yeah.
So I'm sad to say, but we ended up watching a YouTube video. So it's been hard. It's
okay.
It's a light-hearted example, but it's
a very real example. I've felt useful on many occasions tying a tie for my son, and you do feel stupidly proud of being able to do such a small thing.
Yeah, it's an important milestone.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So thank you, Tanya and Cameron, for joining us. I really appreciate your time, and I wish you both well, and Aidan too. Please say hello to him from us. Katie, I want to end with you. Katie Armstrong.